Yes.
Right, we're good.
Advantage Kennedy retirement means legitimacy, low non irredeemable, max 18. Kennedy helps sustain stability, serve as a bulwark for the rule of law. Retirement will spark chaos. Court legitimacy is up for God's future rest with Roberts, sustain conservative legitimacy. 2. Internal links. 1. Press freedom, press executive court checks on government officials. That's Clark and Satan. 17. Reporting government activity media, spread info, text on media, threatening essential component of courts. Democratic power, the public ability to monitor possible violation of the rules for courts. Serve as minimal checks on power. Nations also have a free media. 2nd is precedent, clear precedents. Are key to SCOTUS legitimacy. The also is lower court narrowing, which destroys precedents. Race 16. The court issued precedents. Lower courts are much followed. Lower courts are petition to regulate claims of adherence to precedent. Narrow is interpreted rather than overriding. Narrow construes that precedent actual why when precedent is ambiguous. Narrow for what has been used to incorporate precedents. And Bodie mean the burst the court will go on to have a right to pursue habeas corpus. The judge criticized Bodie mean while construing it narrowly, effectively overruled Bodie mean. Narrowing enables lower courts to act on their own views, influence higher courts' agendas. Clear rules can preclude legitimate narrowing. And court legitimacy is key to U.S. power. It's well rule law and checks on accountable executive power. That's C to 11. Legal principles in the Constitution are social attraction for others. So the American Constitution framework would make it more likely nation will be attracting American interests. Lost the executive may be reaffirmation of our Constitution. And soft powers have multiple justifications, structural violence. That's 9. Armitage 7. If people believe American justice to be legitimate, we perceive them involve legitimacy, reduce opposition to power, integration of economy, disease, harm, pose, and nuclear capacity to see. The threat will become more and more likely as nuclear weapons increase. While climate change raise states who go draw allies will gain advantages. Plan tax the Supreme Court of the United States ought to interpret the freedom of press clause of the First Amendment to justify a right of reporters to protect the identity of confidential sources. That's Konarski 14. The role of the Supreme Court is to interpret the Constitution. Individuals like Snowden, who's seeking who's supposed to use his government practice, have no insurance their identity will be protected. Without reporters' privileges, people won't know what the government is actually doing. But the free press clause of the First Amendment would be interpreted to include a reporter's privilege that protects reporters from being forced to testify about the identity of sources. And circuit court precedent is split on reporters' privilege. That's Konarski 2. Circuit courts interpret ransomware in different ways. Split exists with regard to scope of a privilege, including who might pertain and in what context the privilege applied. Neither 8th, 4th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st circuits have found reporter privilege exists. 5th, 6th, 7th, and rejected the existence of reporter privilege. Rule of the ballot. The role of valid is to evaluate the desire to leave the act policy versus a fiat competitive policy option. For rule and reciprocity, truth testing means they can totally deny one premise of the rest and prove the entire thing false. We always give them unreciprocal access names, which I can't win off of. Reciprocity outweighs since it controls access to the ballot. 2nd, real education. 8. We consider ethical claims. When we consider ethical claims, we consider the material policies and issues surrounding them instead of abstract theory that we could never apply to real world situations. B. Role playing is key to 21st century skills. Platinum. Role-playing methodology helps students become more involved, not only about learning about the material learning, to integrate knowledge into action, address problems, explore alternatives, think creative solution. Role-playing is the best way to develop communication, problem-solving, self-awareness, and cooperate. These are above the mere learning of facts will help young people be prepared with dealing with the challenges of the 21st century. Real world outweighs absence being able to apply my knowledge in the real world. It's irrelevant. 3rd is fairness. Anything else moves these fluency offense, which precludes me from being able to gauge the have 13 MSU in the base of my office. Can't wait me the ransons. Non-consequential frameworks are usually one-sided. For legal education is catered to for a prosecutor. That's Articles. And L10. Legal work is necessary and critical to social justice. We must recognize the limitation of legal system, learn how to use that to advantage of the past. Lawyer for lawyer people is to support these communities in confronting policies that limit the life chances. The legal system is predicated on arcane knowledge, but it comes supreme significance in politics. The lawyer has the opportunity to expose workings of the system to those who seek to destroy it. A lawyer collaborates with clients so that they can bring power back to the communities and fight against the system. Our communities are going to change, continue to have to navigate government policies and organizations to drive framework. The standard is minimize structural violence. This means you constantly weigh the benefits of the affluent marginalized good versus harm. 1. Moral solution. Ideal theory can account for structural back because it seems certain bodies as non-human. Opto 1. Violence or moral rationalization will identify what we owe to whom, exclude who can be seen as mental exploitation, flaking them, moral rationalization, including insufficient knowledge, or tendency to make hard judgments is a feature of human perception. 2nd, non-national facts are absolutely inaccessible. Papino 16. If physical facts are not limit range of physical causes, more facts allow us that this more facts can never make a difference what happens in the physical world. For us, knowledge immediate physical processes involving our cognitive systems. More facts are not in the physical world. How can you have any knowledge of them? And opinions intrinsically bad. How they've been based in the natural world. That's legal. 86. Pleasure is going to pay down no matter whose. Everyone takes avoidance of pain and promotion pleasure is subjective to infraction. At least possible. I have a reason. I refrain from putting my hand on hot. So people involuntary avoidance reactions that would be motivated to reduce pain because it's an effective way to avoid danger. 3rd is accurate specificity. When governments take responsibility to protect all citizens equally, in exchange for all citizens seeing certain rights, but historically advantages specific reason protecting all regards protecting harm against some people. And it's consequentialism. When government takes responsibility over the public realm, so it's responsible for what occurs within it, even if they didn't actively intend it. Take out calcanites. A point that impeding governments don't use it all the time. People is that it's the only way for states to ever act, which always difficulty using. Since that is inaccessible, always different agents never have particular functions. A watch is a good watch because it tells time. Otherwise, we wouldn't value it, so we'd have no ethical relevance. 4. The consequential is true. 8. We calculate foreseen consequences into intended inactions. We point on the consequence of the rest is evaluated, not deliberate. Finlay, Adult 12. Non-agential sentences say certain states' affairs ought to be. Agential sentences on natural reading seem to claim until claims about agents' reason to act, and so bear directly on their deliberation. We call these deliberate. Short identify 5 hallmarks that distinguish deliberate readings. Deliberate matters directly for advice, functions to deliberation. It's how assessment of agents implies can. 5th, debate should center on material oppression. That's Curry 14. There's a chasm between one versus actual problem and how he frames the problem theoretically. The discovery was actual was represented theory, tendency, real assessment, combination, pressure. We cannot say that the complexity of social problems are totalizable by any one set of theories. Underview. One, depending on scap permissibility of presumption. 8 point, there's always a non-zero risk of one side is true. We incentivize solely reading defensive arguments, which prevents debate on the actual points of controversy. Topic education. Now we only get the topic for 2 months. See point 7 for 6. The double extension of reactivity means they walk into the round with a structural advantage of the round is rebuttal. I see the better rating. Second, section on theory. 8 point. Otherwise, I could have complied, but I was forced to spend time. I was forced to spend a time crunch 1 hour answering shells. P point is that I speak in the dark and can adapt to bidirectional interrupts, i.e. good plans. A plan's good or plans bad. Well, then I can always run T. My offense functions under either interrupts, so don't punish me for infant violations. Force them to try and debate substance. Third, 1 year theory is good. Otherwise, they get to be infinitely abusive, which I always automatically drop the bidder on 1 year theory since the 1 year is too short. To a theory and substance, so I need to be able to collapse. I need to be able to collapse in the 2 year. Fourth is prefer 1 year RBIs because existing time seems not able to win both layers. So I need to be able to collapse to the highest one. If you want me to send that 1 year RBIs thing,
please.
Can you not send it? Can you just like message me on Facebook or something quicker?
Yeah, actually, let's just start cross.
Yeah.
You ready?
yeah.
All right. How do we verify a consequence?
How do we verify consequence?
Yeah.
So in the context of like, if you're asking about calculation, we predict whether a consequence will
What
occur as a
does that
result of the action.
necessitate? Like, what exactly do we do when we predict something?
So it's
Okay,
like how
consequence.
debate works. So
Right.
You say if I do this action, it will lead to this thing, which is a consequence of it. So I don't think it's really that.
I mean, no, I'm
complicated.
asking how you verify whether or not that consequence is necessarily a consequence of that
I don't
initial
think
action.
that it's 100% verifiable.
Okay,
but
so
I think that
how is your
I-
framework coherent?
So just because like you cannot verify something does not mean that it is not ethically legitimate, right? If we win that consequentialism
so
is
it-
something that like is ethically justified,
Wait,
then
so if
even
you
if it's not the
can't verify-
easiest theory to use, it's still the right ethical theory.
Wait, so if we can't verify whether or not your theory is ethically correct or even like is
No.
coherent, then
You're
what
not
does that
asking about whether my
necessitate
theory is
that?
ethically correct. You're asking about how we determine like offense under the theory. My argument is that there is not a
All right,
100%
so now
certainty.
it's not a
of
question about
anything,
your framework; it's
right?
a question about your maxim. How exactly do we weigh
No.
offense with your maxim?
It's a question of like consequences. So I don't think maxims are particularly.
Right. How do you
relevant.
verify those consequences?
I've just explained to you that there is no 100% verifiable way to determine what consequences will come
Okay.
about. We do the best job calculating, but that is how
That's fine.
consequentialism works.
Can you explain the Maths 18 evidence?
The Maths 18 evidence?
Yeah.
So it says that Kennedy's retirement means that court legitimacy is uniquely on the brink now. Trump wants to move it to the right, but the Chief Justice Roberts, who is now the swing vote, has sustained concerns for legitimacy. So preserving court legitimacy now is uniquely important.
Wait. Okay. So let's talk about the next evidence. What exactly is the warrant in the Clark and Stanton evidence?
So the argument is that a key democratic function of courts is that they are able to check back on accountable government conduct, right? Which is impossible if there's not a free press which can expose those unique facts.
That's fine. Let's
Which
talk
the
about the role.
Kanarski 14 evidence says requires the
Sure.
act.
Let's talk about the role of the ballot. I want you to concede that I do not have to fiat a competitive policy. I like.
That's literally what the role of the ballot is. So
No. I will evaluate the desirability of the app policy.
What?
But why does that mean I have to have a competitive policy?
You can defend the status quo.
I can defend the status quo.
Yeah.
It's okay. So I don't have to fiat something like I'm counterplanning or something, right?
No.
Okay.
You just fiat that we.
So we can just
don't
delete the
change
second
this.
plank of that role of ballot. This is the audit.
Kind of, but if you don't defend like the post-fiat benefits of that status quo, then like you still would lose under comparative worlds.
Wait. So comparative worlds assumes consequentialism.
Tiger one.
It justifies consequentialism in a theoretical way, but not necessarily, right? Like we would evaluate
so-
like under like Kantianism.
Wait. So
we could
consequentialism
still
is justified by the
possibly-
role of the ballot, but the role of the ballot is justified by consequentialism. That seems extremely
No.
circular.
So there are two important things. First is that under other ethical theories, you can still determine whether the app is like a good idea or not.
Wait, that's not a
versus
coherent
the
answer.
status quo.
You just told me that the role of the ballot justifies consequentialism, and
Okay.
the consequentialism is justified by the role of the
No.
ballot. Can you
So-
answer that question?
So first is that the role of the ballot is like a justification theoretically for my framework. However, even under Kantianism, we can still evaluate whether the like post-fiat policy of the AF is like better or like more coercive,
Okay.
or like if the AF is coercive,
That's fine.
right?
I'll
So
start
it
there.
doesn't trade off.
All right, sure. I'll start there.
Oh yeah, to be clear, if you want me to concede that I won't go for the role of valid as a theoretical justification for util, I will.
Oh, wait, what?
Like if you read TJF's bad, I'm like willing to concede that I will not go for it as a theoretical justification for
Wait,
util.
so we can just kick that argument?
No,
we kick the 3
you
point?
wouldn't kick the role of valid. You would kick
No,
it
kick the
as
3 point. Can you kick the 3 point? Fairness argument.
No.
It's AFC.
No, just so
What?
I will concede that the first two arguments do not justify util.
Wait, what? Wait, I'm so confused. Hold up. Can you like re-clarify what?
If you were going to
said?
read TJF's bad, I will not go for these arguments as TJF's. Fair?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Spilled so much water on myself.
All right, 305. I'll send it up.
Wait, you say you took 305?
Yeah, I took 305.
Okay. I had you at like 21 seconds left, so maybe.
Yeah, I stopped prep when like you interjected like something.
Okay, sure.
I'm good with that.
You're good?
Yep.
All right, cool.
I don't know if both of you are good with that.
I have no idea what just happened.
No, I just stopped prep when like he interjected to clarify something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the show.
It was-
All right.
It was, I think it's justified.
Okay, that's fair.
All right.
I don't think it was justified.
Fight me.
This is the real thing.
Dude, that's so strong. All right, I sent it. Orders, NCAC. On case, it'll be 2 overviews. You should flow separately. Then it'll be starting on the framework, like the roll about stuff, then framing, then contention.
Okay, so NC, AC, the AC on framework, framing, and then the contention. Right?
Yeah.
Should I flow the overview on a separate sheet of paper?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me know when everybody has the doc and is ready.
Yep, I'm ready.
All right, and if anyone can say clear, slow. But all right, anyone not ready? All right, sounds good. Being begins with a major premise. As an X has a property of X, resolution questions the essential property of reporters since that's whether they ought to have a certain right. What ought to do with that right is a byproduct of this action. For example, reporters may not always grant confidentiality even if it were permissible to the resolution. Questions whether reporters are agents that require possessing a certain right. Essentialism formulates a conception of ethics that is necessary to formulate a coherent account of moral duty. Low 13. The essence of a thing is the very being of anything whereby what is X is essence. The identity of X might be an object or person. Things have essences, but otherwise it makes no sense to talk or think about things we do not know the thing. How can I talk or think about Tom's cat if I don't know what cats are denying the essence? It creates an ontological problem. As Tom and his identity, there's nothing to make Tom the particular thing as opposed to anything. Anti-essentialism is incoherent. Thus, the standard is consistency with the essence of agents. Prefer one. Obligations are created from essence. For instance, we derive what we say an object or individual must do based on their fundamental essence. We say clock has an obligation to tell us what time it is because time is a fundamental essence. Second, action theory. Almost all theories must give an account of how to take an action. Only essence answers the question is a fundamentally derived obligation from the ability to take whatever action or object that agent is designed to take, which not only enables action but only is always action. The question will be ought to take the actions first, which is a precondition of ethics. Third is inescapability of reality or a particular object is a characteristic of not having having an essential property, that itself would be an essential property of the existence of such an ethic, which means even an attempt to escape essence concedes authority for its ontology only. An essential account of an agent accounts for existence of the subject. Thus, every account of the subject requires an account of its own existence. Its essence necessarily defines the subject and constrains its very existence making. Its denial impossible without contradictions. You rely on its essence for any account of the subject. Ought implies a normative and binding correlation. So the only property reporter ought to have is one its essential test. Its impact calc reduction test is carried out by removing the essence from the entity, determining if it still is the same and determines its essence. For example, if I remove the quality of having paid for my house, it would still be a house, but if I remove the quality of having walls and a roof, it would fundamentally be a different object. Now to gate 1, there's a distinction between a human right and a group right. Things like the freedom of speech of the former, while the resolution is the latter. Only the former is essential. It's the absence of freedom to express yourself as an agent. You lack agential properties. The ability to prove confidentiality is non-essential, since it is a right added to the identity reporter. After it's already considered a reporter. Second, the resolution is an active action indicating that a state of affairs ought to occur rather than has occurred. This necessitates that since a statement identifies reporters as possessing a necessary component of a reporter, the resolution tautologically proves the right is incapable of being the end-all be-all of the identity reporter. Third is that confidentiality undermines the fundamental essence of a reporter, since the essence of a reporter requires the ability to provide credible information, which is impossible without the ability to provide credible source, and anonymity structurally prevents credibility, since it's impossible to determine the legitimacy of information is conceded by the AC's inclusion of citations where evidence not case. The NC hijacks the alpha. One is that structural balance of that since it is an essential feature, rendering about. Second is that we deny essential properties. We deny essential properties deserving respect to all agents. Third is that theorizing through philosophy is the only way to answer your question about concrete materiality. Fourth, that end states require that there's always some sense of desirability to those ends, which means it always has to be essential. Now, five is that maximizing pleasure is essential characteristics of the subject as per the Africans. They concede the NC. Now, the NC comes first. Overview. One is that prerequisite to determine whether the winner of the round, since the winner is an essential property debate. Second, it's performativity. Denying the NC concedes the validity to relying the essential to the organs. Now, overview. One on the framework. First is that consequentialism is conceptually incoherent. One is that each type of pleasure is qualitatively differently can't quantify and compare pleasure. Second is that aggregation is nonsensical. Assessment of moral harms must reference the individuals, not collective immorality. Question the individual wouldn't make sense to stress around. Third is that an infinite world contains an infinite amount of pleasure being, which means regressive. Fourth is that there's no bright line for consequences and ends will always trigger more ends, which means it would always be regressive. Five is that states don't know what citizens interests really are. Citizens have different pleasures based off their own experiences. They can never do the worth of the policy values. These require a constant reconfirmation that the Avalon can't do since the system would fail when people's value change. Six is that inductive reasoning fails since the existence is always by experience. So unital will trigger a new experience. Seven is that you can't distinguish between act and omission. That holding users accountable even for harms you allow. We can always do more to prevent harm. Now, overview 2, under consequentialism, determinism is true. One is that induction of X actually lead to Y result, and X action must be influenced by prior X action. This means that a causal chain of events structure my action rather than my will. Second is split brains. If I were to take a test and then swap bodies with a classmate, we aren't inclined to believe that I choose the same answer. This means my decisions are key to brain chemistry. Third is states of affairs. States of affairs are only relevant to the infinite amount of personal identities, which would warrant why either A point, every action is determined by the nature of being rather than persons. B point, an infinite amount of action taken by individuals always invalidates the goals of states of affairs. That negates. One is determinism, truth, and ethical calculus. Coherence is action would inevitably happen if nature dictates. Second, proactive action around justifiable, since everything would just roll around the unpredictability ends, which means polarization. Third is that the resolution questions necessitates a right, but consequentialism only cares about end states, which means consequentialism means you vote negative, since otherwise we rely on its own principle for justification for state of nature. There are no rights in a system where every action is permissible. We can do whatever nature dictates. Now, line by line. First on the rule about overview, use comparative verbs with the addition of a normative justification. A point is that a contingent future reality. B point, you can't read impact justified arguments, which would be warranted under comparative verbs. Third is the C point is that you conceded it when you read an ethical framework warrant. Now, on reciprocity, first is that it's more reciprocal to talk about normativity because you could derive a normative obligation. Second is that things such as comparative words are not necessarily reciprocal because there are instances in which bigger coaching staff would outweigh. Now, on real world education, is that role playing is not key. That's the ace of point. It requires doing other things, for example, like lobbying. The B point is that we can learn about how that works through an ethical theory, which is not unique. Now, on the fairness argument, first is turn better for big schools with big coaching staff for more profits to exclude small schools. Second is that fairness is not a voter. A point, no bright line to determine how much fairness is enough. B point, flows the way debaters want. C point, no such thing as there's no such thing since you would have to incorporate the unfair distribution of coaching. Now, third is that less breadth of ground for competing frameworks was always on scope. Now, on the articles of evidence, first is turn short-term strategies means false hope for oppressed groups. That's psychological violence. Second is not true education. It's legal education matters. We talk about lobbying, which is exactly what they do. Now, on the apopto evidence, one is that it begs the question what material impacts matter. Second is that assumes consequentialism and consequences, and looking at material conditions leads to worsening at consequences, which is circular. Now, on the apopto evidence, first is that moral facts describe instances of the natural world. They come lexically part of theorizing. Second is justified normativity creation. A line in the evidence literally says that moral facts need to influence the world. Third is that it begs the question of a natural fact. It's now on Nagel. One is that it assumes consequentialism. You can say that necessary to reject pain that require an action. Second is that it's not a weighing argument. It's just that pain is bad. Other things are also bad, but no reason why they matter. Third is that it doesn't account for people like masochists. Moral norms are a universal premise. If not, that negates. Now, on actor spec. First is on the eighth one. There's not an actor spec argument. This warrant literally just says that people need to solve harm. So the second argument is that this is a retributist claim that justifies the deontic theory. Third is hijacks. Only my framework can contextualize what we have an obligation to solve that harm. Beyond the B point, this has no warrant. It just says that people manage the public realm so they could just care about you. So second is that the U.S. acts based on constitutional authority, not end-based consequences. Third is that how can I still apply? They say that governments can use it, but doesn't mean they're using it correctly or ever can. Now, on the fourth point, first is that it prescribes infinite obligations. We are responsible for every possible deliberation. Second is empirical claim without an empirical warrant. Now in Finley, one is that this doesn't apply to use, so it just mentions that the term states of affairs and deliberation. Second is that this auto negates absent an agent and taking action, and states of affairs can't prove an obligation. Third is that it takes out your actor spec argument. For example, the first line of the card literally says non-agential statements require X. Now on the Curry evidence, one is that abstract ideal theory is the only way to theorize about certain forms of repression. Second is turn. It means the unjust world warrants why we shouldn't follow the absence. It's always epistemically skewed. Now the third argument is that in the context of race, which means it's in the context of race, which means it doesn't warrant your offense. Now on the first advantage turn, it encourages breaking the law and shielding clear government misconduct. At least in a contrast, the case without a source is breaking the law. The misconduct is conversation reporter. The reporter cannot testify the crime will go unpunished. The Valerie Plummer case reporters allowed to protect the White House officials who improperly leaked information. The Balkan case reporters would have to protect defense attorney committed perjury, obstructed justice, or attempted fraud. Cut the card at fraud and skip the other cards. Now the on your first on your presumption are on the 8.8 is that even if there is a non-zero risk, it can't be evaluated by the judge, which means it's irresolvable. The second argument is that empirical claim with an empirical warrant. Just because the case does not mean it has a warrant. Now on the B.1 is that no, there can be instances where two offensive arguments are conceded, which means it's not just defense. The second is that no one only reads defensive arguments. If anything, turn is better for you could just jump on presumption for every speech. Now on the C.1 is that you speak first, allowed to control judge first action. Second is that time to use not a voter, since I can't change it, which means judge is not a voter. Third is that you can set the terms around, which means you have the consecutive ability set terms which you err negative. Now presume negative when we assume statements more likely false and true, which is why we don't believe in alternative reality to conspiracy theories. Second is that statements are more often false than true. Also reject 1 AR theory. 8 point is that you keep collapse on in the 3 AR, which is within the 2 AR. I don't have a 2 3 AR to respond.
Wait, actually, can you like send? Is there anything that you did not read in here?
Yeah. Do you want me to just send the new doc?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll just like tell you here. It's the it's just like I didn't read the rest of the card. Like I cut the card here at fraud right here.
Fraud.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And then I didn't read the rest of the cards.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
everything else is right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Wait, let me see. Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Okay, you're good.
Yep.
Let's talk about the second argument. The first and second arguments on Papino. What
On
were they?
Papineau?
Yeah.
The first and second?
Yeah.
The first argument is that moral facts describe instances of the natural world. For example, there would be instances in which moral facts would lead us to believe certain things about the world, which means they come lexically prior to theorizing.
Okay, why is the NC a moral fact?
Because it describes the states of affairs. It
How
just
does
says
the-
that
how does-
essential
that
properties.
seems to be util. What?
What?
Like,
No.
why is the NC a moral fact?
No. The argument is that essential properties necessarily mean that it's innate. For example, if something is like an essential property of something else, it means it's a moral fact. If I normatively justify
Okay,
it.
what's the second argument?
Sure. So the second argument on what was it, Papineau?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it justifies normativity creation because there's a line in the evidence that literally says that moral facts need to influence the world.
Okay. So, okay, if I beat this NC and the turns, and like these calculi things, is there any other way for the negative to win in the 2NR?
What? I mean, I don't know. I'd have to like make interactions and go over my flow and stuff. I don't know what
Okay,
you're asking me.
if I'm asking you the ways that you can win. If I beat the NC,
Dude, I just read
if
the
I beat these
NC.
calcunites and the reasons that they negate, and I beat the turns, is there any way for the 2NR?
If you beat everything in the NC, then I guess there's no
That-
way for me to substantively win. Like,
I'm
I
asking
don't know
if
what
there
you're
are any
asking.
triggers in the NC. You know what I'm asking. Answer the question.
Wait, why couldn't you just straight up ask me if there are any skep triggers? Like I would have been happily
Why?
like able to answer that.
Okay, so answer. Like, why can't you answer that?
Because you didn't ask me.
Okay,
Like
I
don't.
just asked you.
Okay, so you
Like-
want to know if there are any skep triggers in the NC?
And skep triggers, permissibility triggers, trivialism triggers, whatever.
I will not trigger
want to know.
permissibility or skepticism in the NC.
Are there any trivialism or presumption triggers?
I will not trigger presumption insofar as you, like, for example, if like
What
you
about
concede
trivial?
framework indicts, and then I concede arguments for why my framework is wrong, or I lose on my framework, then that would be an instance in which presumption would become relevant. But
Okay.
I won't say that because my framework is substantively like true that you
Okay,
go to
and then there are no trivialism triggers, right?
No.
Okay.
Trivialism, like I don't know how I'd trigger trivialism.
Let's talk about the answers to Curry. Actually, no. Let's talk about the NC. So, what is the essence of a thing?
Sure. For example, I think that the great argument that contextualizes this is the reduction test, which is under the impact talk section. The argument is that in order to determine whether or not something is an essential feature, you remove the essence from the entity, or what is the presumed essence, and then determine if it's the same in the context
Okay,
of that
so
essence.
even if the app is not like necessarily like part of the essence of the thing, why does that mean that everything else is irrelevant?
Wait, I'm confused. What do you
Like,
mean?
which arguments in the like contention prove that the app is inconsistent with the essence of a reporter?
What do you mean in the contention? I think your advocacy proves that it's
Why?
not. Oh, sure.
Like,
there were
those are
like 3
contention
negate
arguments in the NC that I want to know.
Oh, you're just asking me to explain the contention arguments? Like, you could have just said that.
No, okay, so
Like,
which arguments in the NC prove that the app is inherently inconsistent with the essence of
the 3-point and the now negate arguments.
Okay. Starting prep now. Oh, if I win, the app is consistent with essential, the essential elements of a reporter, do I win?
Again, I'm not just gonna say you win if you do X.
If I turn the NC, do I win? Dude, answer the question.
No, you obviously would not just win off that because then you could just, like, I'll just say yeah and then just spend like 4 minutes turning the NC.
Okay, so it's a nib.
What?
Is it a nib
You
or
could have just
not?
asked me if it's possible to turn the NC and then I would answer that question.
Is it a nib or not? Like, answer
What?
the question. Is it a nib
No,
or
it's not a nib. You didn't ask me if it's possible to turn it. You just asked me if I turn it, do I win?
Yeah, if you turn
Like-
NC and concede the framework, then you win. Like, that's how turns work.
Oh, so that's what you were asking. I thought you
Yeah.
were asking me that like if you turn it, I automatically win the round.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do I win if I win a turn and concede?
You win on the NC if you turn it. Yes.
Okay. What was the second argument against the C point under don't vote neg on permissibility / presumption?
Which argument?
The second argument on the C point.
Second argument on the C point. Sure. Times 2 is not a voter.
Why?
Because it's structural, which means that it's impossible for me to change.
You defend the status quo, right?
I don't know what that means. I defend the NC's maxim.
Do you defend the status quo or not, dude? Like,
I defend the NC's maxim.
Okay. What was the third argument on the A point on actor specificity?
The which argument?
Actor specificity. The third argument on A.
Third argument on A was only my framework can contextualize why we have an obligation to solve something.
Okay. I have 18 seconds left. The order is quickly on the app contention, the app underview, then the overview to the app, and then the NC.
Which
Oh
overview?
yeah, sorry, I didn't put the framework there. So contention, underview, AC framework, the overviews for AC, and then the NC.
Contention, underview, overviews, right?
So the only two overviews I have is determinism is true and then that negates.
Okay.
So those,
Okay.
yeah, that's all going to be answered as one.
Okay. No NC.
No, the NC's at the end.
Okay.
Oh yeah, there's just like an overview to the case. Do you want it? Yes.
I guess yeah.
Oh, and there'll be like some quick roll of the ballot stuff in between the AF contention and the AF underview.
So where are you starting?
I'm starting on the AF contention
Okay.
with like a quick overview. So to clarify, because that was like kind of unclear, the AF contention, the role of the ballot, the underview, the framework of the AF, and then the overview to the case, and then the NC.
Just saying, post.
Yep.
Will do. Let me just like pull up the one NC doc. Alright. Is everyone good?
Capital nomination means the court legitimacy low nomination irredeemable plans, one plan, clear circumstances that's canarchy, under clear precedent allows lower courts to narrow precedent to inapplicability, destroying so that's Ray outweighs their offenses, even if it leaves a little bit of breaking law. This completely destroys the power of precedent. Second, that the plan enables whistleblowers to express government context, that's canarchy, accountability is key to court legitimacy, since it enables court to check misconduct, that's Clark and State, which outweighs the arguments about how it destroys the essential functions of reporters, because the function of reporters is to expose misconduct of the government, which they cannot do absent the AF court legitimacy checks on accountable executive action. It makes the U.S. seem reasonable and driven by rule of law that state soft powers key cooperation of global existential threat that's which obviously leads to a massive amount of structural violence and was conceded now. The rule of ballot. Extend the real world education argument. They say that it would just the point is that we consider the real world when we consider ethics. You have to defend it legitimate advocacy. Otherwise, you should not vote for them. They say that they will not defend the status quo. They just that their maxim is good, which they do not defend opposed to a policy option. They say that would lead to lobbying. No, my argument is that that is the most real world there. Their second argument was their second argument is some is like fairness solves or whatever. But obviously like fairness is not a voter. But this argument is about education, not about fairness. Now the framework, or the underview. Extend the C point under Joven again presumptively permissibility because there's already in affirmative side. You prefer my argument epistemically because there's because a significant amount of empirical examples prove that these arguments. I'm going for time to outweighs all of your arguments. If I don't have time to make arguments of access to not relevant. They say last and first speech, but this doesn't apply for flow judges. They say time to isn't a voter, but isn't a voter because you can't change it. But it still proves that there's a skew. They say that they say that you get to turn the framework. You can still contest those arguments, which obviously resolves it. Now, now the framework. First, going for Papineau, this obviously answers their argument since it means you shouldn't care about essential functions, but rather just that because it doesn't mean to an end to promoting overall good extent. Papineau says that we can only understand natural facts empirically proven because the operative reason is historically unreliable. Prove my widespread ethical disagreement. They say that they then group the first and second argument. They both misunderstand what moral fact is. My interpretation of moral fact is something that is grounded in the physical world. Their interpretation is something that is inherent to an agent, which means that the Papineau evidence is talking about something very distinct from what they say. They say that begs the question of what things are naturally important. But the Nagel evidence obviously answers that. So we said Nagel, we have involuntary avoidance to pain, and we have an inherent enjoyment of pleasure, which is that it's subjectively good. I always all the arguments on epistemic probability because they are most likely to be true since they're inherently encoded. They say the third argument is masochist, but obviously but those people still can whatever they conceive as bad. They necessarily engage in pleasure in pain, which means that they simply have a different interpretation of what pleasure is. They don't necessarily not care about it. Now so those arguments outweigh an absolute probability, which takes out the first and second argument. Now, actor specificity. Extend the point of reparations. Governments have to equally treat everyone because they certain people have been historically disadvantaged. You have to prioritize certain people in your impact. Obviously, that you say it's not about expected. Yes, it's about structural balance, which is what my impacts are. Because obviously nuclear war would harm oppressed people. They say that justifies deontology, but no, reparations is not a deontological argument. It's not retributivism. It's reparations. They say that the only warrant is about nuclear war. But obviously it's about between this argument is just false. They can see that it takes out Kafka's the 8 points that is empirically denied. They see that it doesn't prove empiricism, but yes, it does. It proves that governments use this all the time, which answers all of their arguments. Now, extend that out because different functions have different obligations, which means that it turns all of their arguments because the government is the foremost actor. Reporters are simply the people that they are acting towards, which means that now the overview. As an overview, all these arguments, one is that all these arguments just prove that frameworks hard to use, not that it's wrong. Second is that they're empirically denied. Governments use these things all the time whenever they engage in action. All of their arguments just prove that it's a little bit hard to use a framework, not that it's wrong. Now, Google their arguments for why you shouldn't vote after determinism true. Permissibility is obviously irrelevant. Cross with the argument from the interview. Now, the NC. As an overview, one is that this convincing is a fallacy because just because this is what is inherent doesn't necessarily mean that is what it ought to be. Second is that this is necessarily being crossed by the Canarski evidence. Always the arguments, even if it's a little bit less credible, they're actually able to expose misconduct, which is the primary purpose of reporters.
Can I just flow that first argument to like the entirety of the second argument after the timer?
I mean, it wasn't. I started it before.
Okay. So what was the second argument then? With the timer kind of like cut out the argument. I couldn't really hear it.
So the argument was that cross-apply Canarski. I also made this argument on the case, but the foremost purpose of the government or of reporters, as per our Clark and Staten evidence, is to expose misconduct, which means that like if the app does that, then that outweighs your offense.
Okay. How much prep time did I have left? Like a minute. 55. Thanks, Rex.
You're welcome.
That's on the call. Wait, explain the second argument again?
So the primary purpose of reporters is to expose like misconduct. So if the app does that, as per Canarski evidence, by allowing people to come out, then that like obviously turns and outweighs your offense.
Alright. Oh wait, no. I have 4 seconds. Alright. So the order is gonna be an overview, just like a hearing overview type thing. Then
Where you want us to blow it?
it's just like a hearing overview, it's not really a flowing
So
overview.
where's the next place you're going?
Next place I'm going will be the NC.
Okay.
Then it'll just be like the case.
Okay.
Hearing overview.
I flow those anyway.
Okay.
I just don't blow it all, so
Yeah, I don't
it's
believe-
all one long.
Alright, so I
Like I
got
said, I need the speech and just kind of
So very tasty.
Oh yeah, so
defer to.
It's gotta be paired with a good stick.
NC.
Easy there, Rex.
and the AC where?
It'll be interactions.
So the overview or just
Yeah.
like
Comes from the vineyards of Argentina.
So just for like for the purpose of more specificity, it's the NC. Then on case it'll be like the interactions, NC interactions. Then it'll be case substance. All right.
so when you say interactions, do you mean like the one that's the overview or just
Like the 10 reasons the app
Okay.
collapses to the NC. Let me know when everybody's ready. Alright, cool. This round is game over. They've conceded every reason for why the app dissolves to the NC, which means that all I have to do is win risk of offense on the NC, and it's sufficient for you to vote for me. They don't have any offense on the NC, which means it's practically game over. First is the low 13 evidence. They've conceded, and essentialism formulates a conception of ethics that is necessary to formulate a coherent kind of moral duty. Here's the framing issue on this argument. They've conceded that we should use the roll-about with the added plank of adding normativity, which means that if I have any risk of normativity, then it is sufficient to vote for them, vote for me under their roll-about, which is a game over issue. First is the argument for why we cannot understand a presence or an essence of it, or we cannot understand how states of affairs function without understanding the essence between those two things. For example, in the instance of Tom's cat, for example, I can't talk about Tom's cat if I don't know what cats are. For example, denying the essences would always create an ontological problem because unless Tom has an identity, there's nothing to make Tom a particular thing. For example, he would be opposed to certain things, but anti-essentialism would always be incoherent. First, extend the standard, that the standard is consistency with the essences of agents. The first argument is going to take out your is-ought gap argument. First is that obligations are created from essence. For example, when we derive what we say an object or individual must do from the fundamental essence. For example, you could take the extrapolation from their argument inside of the 1AC that says that the only way we understand a function of an object is via whether or not something says that there is a fundamental essence that says that there is something that should be derived from that. For example, their obligation. This takes out their is ought gap argument because it means that even if something is, it necessarily proves what ought to be the case, which means it cross-applies excellently with this argument. Also, the second argument is a game over issue. The action theory argument indicates that all theories have to be given a coherent account of taken action, which means that even under the 1AC's framing, it is sufficient to vote negative. For example, we do not have an understanding of an action unless essence is necessarily coherent, because otherwise you would derive an obligation for whether or not an object or agent would take an action. For example, it enables action, but now it's game over. First is the interactions are fantastic. The inescapability argument means that even if a states of affairs are necessarily good, that states of affairs would be an essential property of that states of affairs, which means if I'm winning essential offense, that is sufficient to vote for me now, then under the offense. You have conceded the first point that says that there's a distinction between a human right and a group right. Things like freedom of speech are the former, while the resolutions allowed. The framing issue on this argument is that the former is essential, since absent the freedom to express yourself as an agent, you lack agential properties. This is game over because the ability to provide confidentiality is not essential, since it's merely a right that is not innate, i.e. things that are not human rights. Yes, it is conceded, which means that it's game over. Also, you've conceded the reason why the resolution is tautologically negation, because you've conceded that the resolution is an active action. For example, it includes that states of affairs ought to occur rather than has occurs, which necessitates that since the statement identifies reporters as possessing a certain right, is incapable of being, it means that it's incapable of being the end-all be-all of the reporter, because the resolution semantically says that they are already reporters without having the right, which means that they're already considered reporters, which means that it is non-essential. It's game over. Now, case interactions. Even if you're winning the AF framework, you conceded the NC controls the internal link and hijacks the AF. First is that structural violence in util is necessarily, structural violence is only bad since there's an essential featuring rendering it bad. Also, the next argument I'm going to go for is that maximizing pleasure under consequentialism means that there are essential characteristics of the subject as per the AF, which means they concede the NC. But also, if that is not the case, I'm going to go for reasons why the NC semantically comes first. First, you've conceded the performativity argument, which is the second argument that says that denying the NC concedes its validity since you rely on the essential truths of your arguments. For example, when you say that a util is necessarily coherent, that means that util is an essential property for the debate, which means it's a jurisdiction impact and outweighs, which means it is a reason for why it's game over the NC now framework or line-to-line arguments case. I'm going to interact fantastically with your argument about why the purpose is to expose conduct, which is your only piece of offense on the essentialism of NC. First is that this assumes consequentialism. Your argument says that when reporters have confidentiality, then it makes them come out and expose them. For example, there would be instances in which it would protect confidentiality, which would be essential, but that would be reified, but the contention level offense would be consequentialist. You conceded consequentialism is incoherent, which is the entire framework dump that you have conceded. You just say that it proves that the framework is hard to use, not a reason for why the framework is bad. You've conceded reasons for why induction necessarily fails, because existence is always triggered by an experience, so util always triggers a new experience, which means it would be infinitely regressive. Now, infinite reject frameworks that are infinitely regressive based upon is that otherwise you would be able to literally warrant any argument and then say that it would be sufficient to vote affirmative. For example, if you had an argument that says that util is necessarily coherent, and then reasons for why something would always reify itself, that would be a reason for why your framework would be conceptually incoherent, which means util is over. Vote negative. Now, the underview really quickly. You say you go for the times Q argument, and whoops, you conceded fairness is not a voter. First six on the ace of pointers says there's no bright line for how much fairness is enough, which means it's incoherent to determine that argument. Now your actor specificity argument is absolutely atrocious. You conceded all of the line by line arguments on the actor specificity argument. First is that you conceded that it's a retributist claim. For example, it justifies a deontic theory, because even if there are certain instances in which an actor needs to set an end, that means that they just set that end rather than having some instance in which they have to pursue it or care about the consequences of that action, which means that you should vote negative. But also you conceded the third point that says that calc indicts necessarily still apply. For example, they say that governments can use it, but it doesn't mean that they're using it correctly or even can, which means that if I'm winning a calc indict to util, then it's sufficient to vote negative, even if they're winning the actor specificity argument. Now, the next argument they go for is the Papineau evidence. Multiple arguments on the Papineau evidence. They've conceded the second argument says that it justifies normative creation. For example, a line in the evidence literally says that moral fact needs to influence the world. If I win normativity, it's sufficient to vote negative, which means it's game over. But also, even just to conceal just to solidify the round, they've conceded the turn on their offense, which is the Ellison evidence. The argument is that it encourages breaking the law and shielding government misconduct. The Ellison evidence is fantastic in terms of the case. First is that it contrasts the case with the source of who's breaking the law. The argument is that misconduct is a conversation with a poor aid outweighs because it's empirical claim. Your arguments are all speculative. However, you conceded that specifically in the case of Valerie Plame, case reporters would have been allowed to protect White House officials, which means it turns the entirety of your case. Here's how the round breaks down. They go for a bunch of arguments. AFC, fairness is not a voter. They don't have offense there. Their active spec argument conceded multiple warrants. It's game over on that argument. They have no offense on the NC, but even if that is the case, they conceded reasons for why their offense is incoherent. Their extension of the presumption argument is incoherent, because they've conceded reasons for why They concede reason for why fairness is not a voter. It's game over.
Starting now. Okay. The order is the AF contention quickly, the AF framework, the overview to the AF, starting on the calc indites, then the hijack stuff. Actually, no, starting on the hijack stuff, then calc indites, and then the ends quickly.
Okay, go for it.
Okay.
Good, he said that.
Congrats on the goal.
Got it. Got it.
Okay.
They have conceded two internal links that were weighed against this really shitty Eliason card. The first is the precedent argument that array evidence indicates that it would lead to lower court nearing absent a clear precedent, which enables them to literally make precedent completely inapplicable, which is the way that the Supreme Court enforces their methods on lower courts, which is obviously necessary for legitimacy. I always one individual thing because it's empirical, because even if individual instances they do break the law, like the Valerie Palmer case, this is about overall precedent, which was a conceded weighing argument. The second is that it enables checking misconduct because they're able to report things to the government, which outweighs, because even if they shield some people who are breaking the law, they take down government officials, which is significantly more important in the context of the law. So extend our offense that the argument is necessary for legitimacy, which is key to soft fabric as a frame existing constitutional principles, which is that we have decisively won the AF. Yeah. So now the AF contention, or the AF framework. I'm going for the Papineau argument because it was not sufficiently dealt with. They extend the Papineau argument, that we only understand natural fact, which is epistemically proven. They can see the epistemic probability weighing argument that we do not, that we are very uncertain as to the correct epistemic a priori conclusion, but we, as proven by centuries of misinterpreted ethical debate, which means that all of their arguments about ethical essence you cannot epistemically determine, because the most fundamental fact as per our Nagel evidence is that happiness is a good thing. So extend the Nagel evidence, which said we have involuntary avoidance to pain and an involuntary desire for pleasure. They've conceded the arguments. The only argument that they've extended two arguments. First is that is innate, but they've conceded that misunderstands our interpretation of what a natural fact is. Our interpretation of a natural fact is something like pleasure that is grounded in the natural world. Their argument is about the essence of something, i.e. its constitutive purpose, which is definitely not based in the natural world. Their second argument is that it has to influence the world, but obviously the consequences are the things that most influence the world, which is the essential Nagel evidence that these things are inherently bad. Yeah, so that's like outweighs the framework, and it's a pretty good framework justification that was not dealt with well. Now the overview. So as an overview to all of these arguments for my framework collapses, I probably cannot have answered every single argument that you are wishing. You should at least give me new extrapolations of why my arguments interact with their arguments, even if I didn't directly answer them. So crossed by the weighing from the Papineau evidence, which says that these are the most basic things. You say that we only care about it because it's an essential feature, but no, we want the most essential feature is happiness because of our Nagel evidence. Even that they're talking about essential feature in the context of actors, but they can see the argument that I made in the one, which is that we're only talking about the government. Those are that's the most fundamental actor of the resolution, because the resolution is specifically talking about a government action, which means who they're acting towards. You should prioritize how the government is acting. They people's freedoms or people's happiness. That is an essential characteristic, or that util is an essential characteristic. But no, we won. But no, that just means that my framework collapses in an argumentative sense, not why this essentially is relevant. Now on the calc index, they send the first argument for why this my framework is hard to use. Not that it's wrong. They say that we answer their argument because even if it's hard to use, that it's not necessarily wrong. They say that we wouldn't call anything bad, but this is obviously new extrapolation, giving new answers. There's infinite bad and infinite good, because there's a lot of pain and a lot of pleasure between them. They cancel out, so each individual action is still good or bad. Now on the NC, they extended a bunch of arguments, but I've already done weighing via the epistemic probability argument. Also, the self fallacy is proven. Just because it is inherent to a person doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing for people to do.